Okay, this is the 24th of September, which is a Sunday. It's the last Sunday in September 2023 rather. And it's time for a global town hall. Hello, friends. Greetings to you all. I see Bill Lycum. I see Paul Werbos. I think Marilyn Krieger. And yep. I see...
The whole world is going up and down.
Well, so we can join with them. It's nice to see you, Paul. What have you been doing with yourself, Paul?
My biggest project this past month has been an attempt to get the Indian government and industry behind a new plan for developing and deploying a new quantum technology to be able to see the sky better. And the UN Security Council strongly endorsed the idea of developing new AI to give us a warning system so that every country on Earth would know if a hostile attack is coming and might be ready to defend against it. An open, transparent global warning system. The Security Council asked for it, but there were some political obstacles that might take years to work out. And so to get started, the Indians may produce this kind of observation capability, and I've been working with them to try to build up their technology. It's a long shot. India has a lot of work to do to become ahead in this technology of the other countries, but some of us know how they could do it, and we're trying to help them.
Well, I take it that you're talking about ICBMs arriving. Is that right?
I'm talking about developing a fundamental observation capability to observe the sky, which you could use to see ICBMs, but you could also use it for asteroids hitting the Earth, solar flares. It's a general purpose technology for observing the sky quicker and better with higher resolution.
Okay, I think we should get behind that. I'm not sure, but I think, can anybody give a good reason not to support that? Would it eliminate the possibility of a mistake about, in other words, right now, I think one of the problems is there's this launch on warning or something like that. And if it's possible for somebody to fire a missile and do terrible damage, and nobody would know where it came from. Would that eliminate that possibility, Paul?
It would substantially reduce that risk. Yes, you're exactly right.
Well, thank you for doing that. Let's see what else we have here. I see Robert Phillip here for the first time. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Meta.
Tell us what you're all about. Oh, that's wonderful. I like the background. You've got this lady, naked lady lying on her side. I'm more interested in your background than you, but at the moment, but I'm sure you will tell me something that will make me interested in your work on global warming.
I'm mainly interested at the moment in marine cloud brightening. So I'm working with Stephen Salter in Edinburgh to develop his proposals to test marine cloud brightening.
Yeah, well, he's been on my show a dozen times, maybe a lot of times, because I really like what he does. And I'm glad to know that you're working together. That's very good news. Bill Lycum, hi. Hey, Bill, I came across your name in the LA Times. I happen to subscribe to Press Reader, which gives me the right to read 7,000 newspapers and magazines a day if I want. So well, that's how many they have. And I was reading the LA Times, and it talked all about you and the baby beaver, which I'd already known something about it. How's our baby beaver doing?
Well, I haven't seen it since, but I assume that it's doing okay. That article started here in Palo Alto and spread all the way across the country. And it was published in your Toronto Star.
Oh, well, I didn't read the Star, although I could.
Yeah, I sent you a link on that.
Remember?
It's somewhere in your computer.
Okay.
Anyway, everything is moving along okay out there. For those who don't know, this was the first baby beaver to be born in Matadero Creek in over 160 years.
Oh, wow.
In 1855, the last beaver was trapped and killed here in Santa Clara Valley in California. And so this made a bit of history and got published all over the country. I couldn't believe what was happening, and it's just now settling down.
Okay.
So
Have you gone out to the location where your camera caught a glimpse of it and checked it out? I mean, do you think that he's gone away and moved someplace else, or why haven't you seen him again?
No. The parents are there in the creek, and he or she will stay with the parents for 2 years.
Oh.
And then in about 2 years, it will take off and find its own little patch of the planet and raise its young.
But he's got to find a mate. So where's he going to get a mate?
Well, there's males and females that are dispersing. And so they'll meet up. They always do.
They do. Okay. Oh, they don't need any help. All right.
No, they don't need, not for me. I just observe.
All right. Well, good for you. Okay. Hi, Marilyn Krieger. How are your cats?
Hi, good. Yeah, I'm monitoring. Well, I am helping with some big rescues, but that's something else. And I'm monitoring a couple of mountain lions right now. 2 of them that are showing up in the same place, which is interesting. The other thing I'm doing, which may actually, I don't know if it'll make a difference or not, but I feel so helpless and hopeless. So I have a birthday that's coming up really soon. And instead of just ignoring it, which one does after a certain age, because it's one of those milestone birthdays, I want to make it count. So I'm posting, so far I've started with Facebook, and I posted this big thing, what I want everybody to do. I don't want anything. I don't want stuff, because it clutters everything, clutters the planet.
Above the stove.
I want everyone to go out and to plant a tree. I want them to plant a native tree, a tree that will help the environment. And if it's not a tree, if they live in a city, in a concrete jungle, then a plant of some sort that attracts pollinators to do something to help restore the planet. So that's what I've just started doing.
Oh, what a lovely idea. You know, one of the last, maybe it was the last global town hall, there was a woman up in Peterborough, Ontario, not too far from here, who said that there are something like 30 pollination gardens in her city. And it's a little town. So what are they doing? Well, apparently it's got to be quite a fashionable thing to do, to create a special garden for planting things that butterflies and birds like to consume, right? So I think that's a great idea. We will publicize it if you'd like. Would you like to send me a little ad saying, please create a pollinator garden, and you can sign it Marilyn Krieger, and we'll have your name under it for your birthday.
That would be great. What I can do is I can email you. It's on my Facebook page, Marilyn Krieger, and it's public. But what I'll do is I'll email you what I wrote there, and I'll put the picture that it was a picture I actually took when I was out with Bill in the Baylands a couple of weeks ago at 5 a.m, and it's sunset through, I don't remember what kind of plant it is, but anyway, that's what I'm
Yeah, well, let's do it very quickly because I'm about to put the next issue of Peace Magazine into production. I mean, it's in production, but it will go to publish it in about 3 days, I think. By the end of the month.
That'd be great. And that's my birthday's on the 27th, so it's perfect.
All right. Good for you. Well, happy birthday. That's wonderful.
Well, if it makes a difference, it's just because it's a number, but if it makes a difference, and if everybody did that, can you imagine how it would benefit the planet?
Absolutely. And I'm actually waging a big campaign in my condo to have them plant Miyawaki forests and take up all these lawns. We've got miles, it feels, of acreage of lawns, which do nothing good for the planet whatsoever. And I'm hoping that we will replace all that lawn with some very densely packed foliage and little trees of different kinds. So it looks like I'm making headway on that. We may actually hire a landscaper this week to do the job, but I'm looking for free trees because it's pretty expensive. They were talking about paying $250 to $1,000 per tree. Well,
wow.
That's only silly. You'd be putting a fully grown tree, I guess. We don't need to do that. We can put some baby trees out. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, Marilyn. And I want to welcome, I think Chand is in India, and I would like for you to say hello, Chand.
Yeah. Good morning, Meta. Good morning, all. Good afternoon, good evening. And for me, almost it's midnight here at 11:45 p.m. I am from India, southern part of India. We are all putting our best efforts to see that the nuclear weapons are removed from this planet permanently, forever, by 2030 September. So that is the target with which we are working. And I'm also traveling to New York in the month of November to attend for the second meeting of states parties for the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons from the UN, United Nations. As a civil society observer, I'll be attending, but I'm really interested to be part of your, mission where we would like to make this planet a better place to live by, climate change is one big trouble which we are all facing. In whichever way we can do, as somebody is saying that planting of trees, that definitely would be improving the oxygen level by reducing carbon. Maybe we can get into the other modes of not burning the fossil fuel, and then less consumption of red meat is another thing. And the plastic, single time usage of plastic is another big headache and burden for this planet. And educating particularly all the people of different ages, particularly the young people who would be tomorrow driving the nations as the citizens of the nations. They should be given at the, young age, I mean, in the adolescence or before that itself, to understand and make it better so that they would be making the planet a better place. So I'm really happy to be there with you. And then let me understand how best we all can work together and see that this planet is made a better place and a sustainable place to be.
Thank you, Chan. Actually, I just had lunch here with a lovely woman friend who is also from India. And she's a Canadian and has been living in India 37 years. But she does Gandhian organizing with her husband, Rajagopal. You may know his name. And she's going to be leading an effort to integrate some of the separate subgroups, peace groups and other organizations around Halifax in Nova Scotia, because there are a number of organizations there that feel, as you and I do, that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is a very important thing to support, and that the Canadian government should be signing it for sure. So her effort will be to use Gandhian methods of reaching people's hearts and souls, and talk about that particular issue here in Canada in November. So thank you for what you're doing in India. And you guys are taking over the world now. You Indians are doing a good job of it. Sometimes your Indians are doing a bad job of taking over the world, as you know, in the newspapers of this week, where there's a big spat going on between your prime minister and our prime minister over whether or not India interfered with or actually killed somebody here, a Canadian citizen. So that's now a hot topic here. I don't know whether it's getting much coverage in India. Are people in India talking about that issue much, or is it something that they avoid?
Well, now most of in India, the talk is between the Canadian Prime Minister versus the Indian Prime Minister with the Khalistan, where unnecessarily there is a big, misunderstanding kind of a thing, where there's a drift between India and Canada. Basically, that is a sort of, misunderstanding. I feel personally that it can be cleared provided things are, see, for example, I tell you, India is saying that the visa for the Canadians have been temporarily, stopped. But actual meaning of that is because the embassies, the Indian embassy in Canada, the embassy personnel are unable to reach to their offices because of the, situation over there. They cannot process the visas. When they cannot process visa, they cannot give them the clearance to travel. That is the reason. But it's not that India condemn and India doesn't want to allow them to travel to India. So it can be twisted in such a manner by the media that it can drift much more. This is what is happening by certain media, which is twisting the facts to make unnecessary troubles between India and Canada.
Yeah, I actually have some comments on that as well, because I have been working very hard to build this new partnership with India and high technology. And at a certain point in these discussions, which have gone on for weeks, we suddenly realized that crucial to real world success, a critical possibility was a new partnership between India and a company in Vancouver called D-Wave. And as soon as we started talking about a new partnership with Canada, how it could change the world, that was the exact time when this strange news came out. And I found myself wondering, what was the timing of this news? It has been around for a long time. Why did the news suddenly come out exactly when we were about to try a new partnership with Canada, which could have changed the entire global situation?
Canada is such a neutral and such a loving country with India. Never we had any sort of misunderstanding. Now this is just a created misunderstanding.
I don't believe that, John.
Pardon?
I don't believe it. No, I believe that
Yes.
the RSS was behind it, and that they did end this man, no doubt about it. And I do believe that when a country has its citizens killed in its own country, they have to do something about it. They have to take a stand. So I'm absolutely convinced that Trudeau is right to take a stand on this. But the question is, what should he do next? And I think that what I've recently come to the opinion that what they should do next is ban all immigrants who belong to the RSS, who are trying to come into Canada, because those are the bad guys. Those are the guys who really are probably causing the problem. So, and simply don't let them in, don't let the RSS people in, and go about our business. Otherwise, go right back to being as friendly as we can be.
How would you screen people out whether they're RSS or not?
I'm not clear who's speaking. Who's speaking?
It's Abbott.
Yes, say it again then, please.
How would you screen out who and who is not a member of the RSS?
When a
There's
person
already a huge
applies-
amount of immigration-related fraud, specifically from there. There's countries with high risk for that, but a lot of people lie on the immigration papers.
Yes, but they can do a very good job of screening them. I believe that,
Okay.
I do believe that they can, and do quite a thorough job about it. I actually,
There's an ongoing.
had a conversation to that effect with, Bob Ray, when he
Yeah.
said he in his youth had actually worked with the immigration department, and he knows how thorough they can be in investigating the background of anybody who applies to come into Canada. So that
Yeah.
can be done and should be done. And then,
There's an ongoing challenge right now with particularly young student age people coming from India who are being targeted by fraudulent acceptance letters to universities. People claim that they represent a university, give them an acceptance letter and pay us a few $1,000s, we'll handle the immigration paperwork, and then they get here and it turns out it's fake. And there's been several write-ups about that in the past month or so.
who's
So this is
faking that? Why would they do that?
They think it's an easy source of money. They're preying on
Who's
the
doing it?
vulnerable population.
Who's doing
I
it?
just said to you, fraudulent people claiming to represent universities.
I see, just individual crooks, I see. Okay, well, we've got a bunch of newcomers here. And as well as some people that have never been on this show before. Ivan Light, my goodness, from my student days, co-student, who both of us are now old. Hello, Ivan, how are you?
I'm okay, Meta. How are you?
Good, I can't see you though, so turn on your camera.
There
There you go, you're in California?
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco Bay Area.
Uh-huh, okay, very good. Tell us what you do these days. Ivan is a retired sociology professor, University of California at UCLA, right?
Right.
And what are you doing nowadays?
Oh, well, what might be of interest to you is I've got a Substack service that I'm starting. It's called Climate Defenders.
Oh,
And my theory, the idea behind it is that most of the people that whom I read about, and I'm reasonably conversant with this discourse, most of the people I read who are talking about climate intelligently and who are most prominent, they're from the technological area, and they're they're fundamentally taking the view, hey, this is the science. Why doesn't the world behave itself?
mhm.
So I'm thinking they don't really have a picture of how to approach the subject in a way that maybe make it most saleable. And so I think that climate defense should not be perceived as a left-wing project because it is, after all, going to affect us no matter whether we're on the right or on the left or in the middle. But and I think, like, if you take the view, as I'm trying to promote on this project, that climate defense is national defense, and that national defense is national security. Now, and then if you take that view, which I believe is highly defensible view, and I can deal with the limitations of it if I have to, but if you take that view, then you're talking to people, this is the United States of America, where national security is a high priority issue for a lot of people in the center and on the right. And if you present this to them, not as a left-wing conspiracy, but as a matter of defending the country against threats, maybe you can bring some of those people along who are not right now on the bandwagon for climate defense. That's the theory of it. So you take the view, for example, that what happened to this country, just this country, not mentioning the rest of the world, because that's another issue. What happened to this country in the summer that we just had, that ended yesterday, if that had been inflicted upon us by a foreign enemy, this would be regarded as an act of war. And something would have been done about it by the military. But of course, the military can't do anything about it. And but it is the equivalent of an act of war, and we know that it's going to get worse. So we are basically being subjected annually to acts of war against which we need to defend ourselves. And then you ask, well, where's the defense? What kind of a defense are we getting? And you see that the defense is missing. We don't have a defense. We're suffering from acts of war that are intensifying, and there's no defense. That's because the federal government, which is the agency in charge of that, is not doing enough. They're doing something. They're doing more than they used to, but they're not doing enough. I'll give you an example. I'm taking an estimate that I found online from Yale that it'll cost $4.6 trillion to electrify the entire country. $4.6 trillion.
Mhm.
Now, in the Biden budget for this year, there's $36 billion you could call devoted to that particular kind of purpose. Now, if you just do the division without getting into any fancy stuff, it'll take 125 years before we reach the $4.6 trillion that we're going to need to electrify the country. And obviously, we're going to need to get the country electrified a lot sooner than 2048.
Mhm.
So that's
I
another.
like your argument. And, about 5 years ago, I had a conversation briefly with Gwynne Dyer, who at that point had just written another book about climate change, his first book about climate change, I think. And he said that what got him into it, of course, he's a specialist who's always written about military issues. He said it was that the Pentagon is obsessed, completely concerned and worried about global warming. The only thing is, and so because he was always going to the Pentagon, they really alerted him to the importance of it. So the guys in the Pentagon are all for doing something about it,
Yes.
but they don't have the power to do. They get their wings clipped too. If Congress says that you're not even to mention the subject, what can they do? So that was his point at that point. Now, this has been 5 years since I read this, and it may have changed. But what do you recommend as a way of getting people to think of it as a national security issue?
Interesting that you mentioned that, because it's absolutely true that the Pentagon is now and has been for decades very aware of the threat of climate defense and is doing something about it. So some of their money goes into climate defense. Whether it's adequate, I don't know. But there's an aspect of this that is not public. It's perfectly public, but it's not publicized. Most people aren't aware of it. What the Pentagon does with the money is to harden the military infrastructure against the threat that climate defense is going to immobilize the military and prevent them from responding militarily to foreign military threats.
Mhm.
That is to say, you want to make sure that those bases that you have aren't subject to flooding, and that you're always able to launch those missiles that are in the silos against the possibility of a nuclear attack by a foreign power, et cetera, et cetera. And although what this means basically is the Pentagon is doing zero to support and protect the civilian infrastructure of the country. What they are concerned about is the military infrastructure of the United States, not just in the territorial United States, but in the 805 military bases that are abroad. They all have to be kept up to date. So when you say, a lot of people, I believe, I suspect, I can't say I know, think that, the Pentagon's doing something about it, and so that must be good. But actually, they're not doing a thing about the civilian infrastructure of the territorial United States. And you can't fault them for not doing it. It's not their job. Their job is to be a ready force that's always prepared to combat, to return the military threats against military threats. That's their job. Their job
but
is not to
sometimes
protect.
the military is called in to rescue people if they get in a disaster situation. And as a matter of fact, I have here the next issue of Peace Magazine, they're just pages that I'm proofreading now, but it's going to press in about 3 days. And it says here, this is something that I'm publishing as newsworthy. It says the Center for Climate and Security has created a new tool for, I can't even understand it, but read what I'm saying here. For watching the interaction between climate and the military. It's called a tracker. Publishes maps every month that show where the military was either has been disrupted by climate or weather, or has intervened to manage weather hazards. So in July, the tracker found the details information where in 16 countries, the militaries were deployed a total of 31 times to different regions and types of hazard. They did this particularly in India, by the way, because they had a higher than 90% precipitation in India. And so they had to rescue a whole bunch of people, the Indian government, Indian army. And in the same thing in the Philippines, when President Marcos was making his State of the Union address, there was an opposition going on, an insurgency going on. And so the army had to go out and rescue people. But while they were doing it, the insurgents were attacking the military. So they had a firefight going on while the president was making his State of the Union address. So it's an interesting phenomenon that the military, even though it's not supposed to be their business, when some population gets in difficulty, they have to go around and rescue people.
Notice, Meta, what you say is interesting. You give the example of India. Right now, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is intervening to protect the water supply of New Orleans. Because of a prolonged drought, the Mississippi River is at very low levels, and that's allowing saline intrusion into the Mississippi Delta. And that is threatening the water supply of New Orleans, Louisiana, because there's too much salt in the water that they normally drink. And so the Mississippi River is being, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is doing something about that. I don't know. I can't tell you more, but it's an example of what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's not really the job of, but they're doing it. I don't, and it is right to point that out, that they are taking care of that. On the other hand, the observation you also made is that when the, and here's the nightmare, when the climate catastrophe strikes and the nation is distracted, putting it mildly, by these issues, that's an ideal time for your enemies to attack you militarily. Mm-hmm. And so this is what the military in this country is primarily worried about, is that we're going to have climate catastrophes and that they will not be able to defend the nation at that time against foreign military aggression. So that's their job. And I think it is their principal job. Mm-hmm. I wish I could tell you what share of their effort goes into protecting the civilian infrastructure. And you're right, some proportion of it does, as I gave the example. But I have the impression that that's not really what their mission is all about. That is a subsidiary part of their mission. I assume maybe in some occasions it could grow, but it hasn't happened. For example, when we had that out of control when we had the out of control wildfires in California for 3 years in a row, they brought in convicts from the prisons to fight the fires for $1 a day. But they didn't use the military. Military was not used for that purpose. Nobody was called in from any military bases. They were actually flying right over my head. We had a fire near here to threaten my house. And you'll be happy to know that we were using Canadian aircraft that is made by Bombardier of Canada, and there's only a few of them around, but apparently the neighboring state of Nevada owns several and loaned them to us. These aircraft had the capability of swooping down over a body of water, which we have close, and then scooping up the water from the body of water, in this case from Tamales Bay, and then they drop it on the fire. So the aircraft were going back and forth over my head, dropping those loads of water scooped up from Tamales Bay onto the fire, which was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles away at that point.
Good. Okay, well, this is very, very interesting. I'm going to put this on gallery view because we have quite a crowd of people here that I haven't even said hello to yet. I see Barbara Burkett and I see Yeshua Moser Poingsuan. Are you in, where are you, in BC, or are you in Thailand or someplace nowadays, Yeshua?
In BC just now. We'll be leaving for Thailand essentially after I go to the General Assembly meetings in October, first committee meeting.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So what is it you're doing what's the news of the day in BC?
In BC, I can't really say. It's more my work has been focused on the issue of cluster munitions and landmines as it has been for many years. We've, of course, had the very unpleasant situation of the U.S. transferring some to the Ukraine and now are getting set for a second shipment to go over. That's been fairly roundly criticized by its allies, including Canada, which we're pleased to see. And I just published a briefing paper on Myanmar's production and use of cluster munitions against its own population. That briefing paper just came out a month ago.
That's a while back. It's not, are they still doing it? Are they still using these, or are these mines that have been put there before?
This is cluster munitions. And it's the first time we've ever seen the Myanmar armed forces use cluster munitions in Myanmar. They've been using landmines like mad for a long time and still are.
Well, I believe I did read something about how the next batch of weapons that Biden is going to be sending to Ukraine will be not just cluster munitions, but some sort of delivery system that's going to make it possible to use them even more effectively. Is that the case, that there's a missile or something that will be used with cluster munitions in the future?
I don't know about that. All I know is that they're sending over 155 millimeters. So those are shell launched. And they have 155 millimeter cannons already over there that they can use that with.
I thought the idea was they could shoot farther with whatever they're going to get on hand.
That may be a separate system, and I'm not familiar with it. It doesn't come up on my radar. So
do you have any particular plans of issues that you want to address at the General Assembly? Are you going to the GA or what?
Expanding participation in our two treaties, the Ottawa Convention on Anti-Personnel Landmines and the Cluster 2008 Cluster Munition Convention. So I'll be advocating for both of those conventions while I'm there.
Okay, well, good wishes to you. So we've got some other folks here. Alexei Prokorenko, are you in Warsaw? Hello, dear.
Hello, dear. Yes, I'm currently in Warsaw, in the same place where I used to be. Tomorrow will be exactly 1 year since my emigration to Istanbul. So I've spent one whole year. It will be tomorrow.
A big adventure for the year. I bet you didn't see that one coming. Okay, so how are you doing now? Are you putting down roots in Warsaw?
Well, we'll see. I've talked to a lawyer, and she told me that I have pretty good chances to get a refugee status. I won't be able to work here in Poland for 6 months. But then after I get the refugee status, I will be free to get employed anywhere with no restrictions.
But you are working, right? Do you not tell them that you're working?
I don't receive any salary for working here. I just work in exchange for dwelling for a room
I see.
in a hotel, in a small hotel. So it's not like it's a semi-official work, let's say.
Uh-huh. So is that true for all refugees, that for a year or more, how long does it take for people to get uh, their situation normalized so that they can work?
Well, normally it takes about getting refugee processing the refugee case. It's about 6 to 8 months. But if it is longer than 6 months since filing the case, you are allowed to work after 6 months exactly, even if the case is not yet over, even if the status has not yet been granted.
So when did you apply?
I'm
Right.
planning to apply for it
Right.
because my
You
visa
haven't
is
applied, I see.
valid
So
until November.
It'll be 6 months after you apply that.
Yep,
I see. Okay.
exactly.
Well, good luck with it. Although
Thank you.
I had the impression that you were actually eventually going to go to the US. And that was true even before the war began, wasn't it? That you had plans, that you had already been accepted for immigration to the US.
Well, that's another option. I won the so-called green card lottery, and I have to make a very difficult decision. Let's say that, because I love Poland and I love the U.S. as a country, and so it's not an easy decision, which will shape all of my life since now on.
Mm-hmm. Well, does anybody have opinions you'd like to offer to Alexei about what he should do with the rest of his life?
Europe or the U.S.?
We'll take a poll and then you have to do what we tell you, okay?
Thank you, because really it's a tough choice. And speaking about the situation in general, I don't see any end to the war nearing us. Unfortunately, I follow the events very closely from different sources, and unfortunately, I would like to be mistaken, but I don't see any solution, any resolution of the conflict in sight. Because it's the worst kind of war, because both parties incur very tough casualties.
But we're hearing about
Yeah.
a squabble going on between Poland and Ukraine now over the price of grain or the right to sell grain. Is that a big issue there? And what's your solution to that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm talking to my Polish friends all the time, and it's really been an issue for a while throughout this summer, because Ukrainian grain is cheaper than Polish, and it brings the prices down for Polish grains to the detriment of Polish farmers. Of course, helping another country is a good thing always, but it kind of ruins the market, ruins the domestic market of Poland, and not only in Poland, because Hungary and Slovakia, the two other countries bordering Ukraine, have joined the bandwagon. They really are coordinating their activities with Poland in terms of not allowing Ukraine to sell cheap grain. I don't know why they don't agree on the price. Why don't they make just Ukrainian grain a little bit more expensive? Why they? I still haven't understood why they have such dumping prices. It's bad for everyone, basically. And the only route that Ukraine can use to export the grain is Romania. the fourth country of the European Union which borders Ukraine. And the Romanians have taken a stance on that issue, as far as I know. And the Ukrainians have been using the mouth of the Danube River to transport grain over there. And the route.
We do hear about the efforts of Ukraine to find routes to get the grain out but I thought that was to the world market, not just to sell it in Ukraine.
Hi, how are you?
Here, muting this person. But they are, how well are they succeeding in getting the grain out of Ukraine to the world market? And how much is Russia succeeding in blocking the transfer of grain through the Black Sea?
Well, in the summer, as I remember, Putin's authorities have called every ship, every single ship which is inbound or outbound from Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea. They called it a legitimate target for attack, because presumably every ship could be carrying military ammunition or weapons. And but now I've heard that some ships under different flags, Israeli flag or other flags, are doing some transportation of grain. Although if we take the mouth of the Danube River, which is shared by Romania and Ukraine, there have been bombings of Ukrainian cities that lie on the Danube. Ismail, the city which Ukraine uses for transporting the grain through Danube, it's been heavily bombed. So Russia is apparently, the Kremlin is taking steps to prevent that from happening, which I think is another crime that needs to be tried afterwards or whenever it's possible to do so.
Do other people here have some thoughts about this issue? I'm open to having somebody else join in. If you want to, let's have a gallery view of you folks and see if there's anybody here with a thought on this issue or something else that you need. Let's see. Lida, you're in Queens. Tell us what things going on in Kingston, Ontario.
All I know is whatever I read in the newspapers about Ukraine, and just as Alexei said, I find it really sad that the war is continuing. Because that means more and more deaths. And at the end, I don't know how much conclusion is going to be either way. So the one phenomenon, which is unrelated to Ukraine, but may be interesting in general, is that as we speak, in Greece, they have elections for the main, say, opposition party. And right now, there is a right-wing party, and the opposition party started as left-wing. But then, because of the pressures from the European Union, ended being what a new term is now, apolitical, if that's possible in Greece, with a political party. The candidate is someone who, in a sense, parachuted into within 30 days, entirely unknown. And the runner-up, it seems it's going to be runner-up after they count all of the votes, is someone who was a minister of labor, very well known, and so on. So the only explanation that pundits and people give to that is that somehow it's spilling over from Trump over all the way to Greece. The only thing is that this kind of thing was happening with right-wing governments, but now it happens with one that's supposed to be left-wing. But at the end, it is, again, apolitical. It's a new term for political scientists to study. Of all places, Greece, you see, had 12 parties in parliament at one point. 12 parties. So crazy. So politics was, important. And all of a sudden, to become so blunt, to put it that way, to have someone who is just a glitzy to become a leader of the opposition, it's unheard of.
Keep us posted on how that's going. I haven't read anything in the press about the outcome of the elections in Greece. So they've had one election and there'll be a runoff. Is that what you're saying?
Now, as we speak now, there is an election of the among the opposition party. Who's going to be the leader of the opposition party?
Okay,
It's not the national elections.
I see.
Sorry, somebody just made a comment about Golden Dawn. I know they were far right. Is that the far right party you're talking about, or?
Yeah, but it's not Golden Dawn that they're having the elections now.
Yeah.
Now it is Syriza. It's called the name of the party.
What's it called?
Syriza, a coalition of
I guess I've heard.
Coalition of the left, let's say.
Right.
I see we have a newcomer here. Hello, Andrei Kamenshikov. Always glad to get somebody from Kyiv. His Kyiv is always on our minds. How are you, dear?
Thank you. Thank you.
What's up?
Well, not much new. I'm still trying to work a little bit on my anti-war messaging project. It's going with difficulties. I don't know if it will ever take off or not. We did prepare a proposal to one foundation with Nonviolence International, so waiting for a decision on that.
Oh, so you're looking for funding now, huh? Is that it?
Yeah, because, there's only that much that we could do with, just the peanuts that we had, really nothing.
And tell us again, tell everybody here what you will do if you get funded.
Well, the idea is to get people from the new Russian diaspora, people like Alexei and others who left specifically because of Putin's war, to help them to become more effective communicators, who are speaking back to their circle of friends, relatives in Russia and so forth, people that they know, speak about what is happening in the country. And what is going on in the war and all that. So that's the general idea, but at this point, it's hard to say if this has any future really. This whole thing. So I don't know.
I'm going to, I may want to draw on you for your network, but probably all I need is what I will get with the assistance of Konstantin Samoylov in Tashkent. I'm going to be doing this series of shows about the global warming in the Arctic. And one of the, of course, a very important player in the Arctic is the Russian government. And Russia itself is so extensive and so much a part of the Arctic, but they don't seem to pay much attention to it. So I'm going to be having focus groups after each of the shows. I want to have a group of different people from different places talking about it. And there'll be one consisting of Russians, mostly, I presume, if not exclusively, Russians like Alexei and you who've left Russia, because I don't think really I could do a focus group with people who are actually in Russia now. But the idea of having them discuss the various innovations that are being considered as ways of reducing global warming in the Arctic. So if, do you know anybody who talks about that at all? My impression is the Russians, they've got other things on their minds right now. And do you know any real discussions going on about Russians and what to do about global warming in the Arctic?
I know it's a serious issue, but at this point, I just don't have any information about this. Sorry.
Does anybody on this group have any information about it? Because I'd be glad to hear that. I would love to know that some Russians are as worried about it as I am, and as we all ought to be. Hey, Alan.
Well, there's a woman who moved onto the corner who was from Russia. I'm not sure exactly. She's connected with the university here in Ann Arbor, and she has a support Ukraine sign in her yard. And hearing what your idea is, I sort of intended to go up and knock on her door and tell her about this conversation, and she is interested. So I'm
You told me
prompted.
once that you had a newcomer from Russia.
Yeah, I haven't more than been able to wave at her. But anyhow, she does a very nice garden, and she has a support Ukraine sign in her yard. And more than that, I don't know. But I'm prompted to meet my neighbor. It's time enough.
All right. Well, thank you. If you capture her, let her know that I might be interested in talking to her.
Yeah, that's exactly my mission.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
If I can connect you, beautiful.
Okay. Very good. Let's see who else is here. That Andre, I want to ask you something. I got very interested in an article. I think it was yesterday, or at least fairly recently, by Tom Friedman in the New York Times, and he poses, of course, the problem we don't want to even talk about. What will happen if Ukraine actually loses the war? What will happen? And you have to, or at least doesn't win the war, and you have to get into serious negotiations for terms on what terms to end it. And he said, of course, it's such a painful topic that they can't even talk about it nowadays. It's unthinkable to talk about what to do if you lose. But he says, how could we find a way to make terms under which Ukraine will have to give up some of its territory and let the bad guys win? But is there any alternative goodie or sweetener that we could think of that would make that bearable for them? And he suggests admission to the UN, the EU would be the thing to do. We're not talking now about admission to NATO, which is what everybody talks about. When will Ukraine get it accepted in NATO? But rather, what he thinks is really on Putin's mind anyway. That Putin is very concerned about the fact that the Ukrainians would much rather affiliate with Europe than with Russia, and that's what brought on that conflict a few years ago, which is the guy had to leave the country. The president had to leave. Okay, so would that make any difference? Would that be if the EU would say, okay, you're going to have to give up some of your land, but we will let you into the EU? How popular would that be, Andre?
Well, it won't be popular at all. Ukraine's position is very clear that Ukraine wants its territorial integrity restored. And even, again, when we speak about losing, I mean, in some ways, Ukraine won the war. It won the war in terms of all the plans that Putin have failed. Mm-hmm. That's clear. All the goals of the war that were announced initially when the war began failed. No question about that. Now, what the real danger is that if this turns into war of attrition that just drags along and there's nothing in sight, no light in sight, then the attitude within Ukraine, internationally, and so forth will start changing to a settlement that will allow Putin to maintain control over some of the territory that he currently controls. And the big issue with that, to be honest, is not even Ukraine. Of course, it would be a very painful experience for Ukraine, and I really wish that doesn't happen. But the worst consequences will be for Russia itself and for the world. Because in Russia, what it means is that the current regime will consolidate. See, what happened a year and a half ago when the full-scale war began, everybody knows that Putin has been in power for 23 years now, but in fact, 22 years or 21 year of that period, he was in charge as a, it was a theocracy, with all kinds of minuses, very corrupt, very inefficient, and so forth. But it was not really a kind of fascist totalitarian state. What happened in the last year and a half, soon after, well, when the war began, the war was a key trigger, a few things, the Navalny story and all that previously, but really what the war triggered is that Russia crossed this threshold between authoritarianism and fascism. What we have in Russia, by all formal means, if you just look at the 16 or what 16 themes, 16 points that allow you to call a country as a fascist state, Russia clearly checks in all these 16 points. It just, again, I'm not speaking about Nazism in this very, but, a typical fascist state, a la Mussolini, maybe Franco and things like that, So that's what Russia has turned into. And it didn't turn into this kind of state over 23 years. It changed in the last year and a half. And because of that, it didn't really consolidate yet. It didn't, it's a new development. It's not something that really, spread roots and, this is some kind of, this is actually a very new situation for Russia itself. And anything today that can be interpreted and sold to the Russian people as a victory in the war will basically legitimize this new system. And what you're going to have is you're going to have a fascist state, with the size, the potential of Russia and with nuclear weapons. And plus to that, and also very, very dependent on China, which also was developing in ways that, we have lots of concerns about. And plus to that, we would have, we would probably, sooner or later, the system will collapse. I don't believe it can last for a long time in the modern world. 10 years, 15, 20 years. The problem is that if it consolidates and it stays like this for a long enough time, then when it does collapse, the consequences will be by far worse than anything we can imagine today if Putin goes. I know that some arguments in the West are that, if Putin goes, things might get even worse, so let's find some kind of compromise and keep it. No, every month, every year he's in charge, the consequence of his he's going to depart one way or another eventually, as all of us will. I hope it happens sooner than later, and I think billions of people hope that, but, the fact is, that will happen. The consequences will be much, much worse if this regime is able to last another 10 years or so. That's what we need to realize. It's not a question of, Russia is not going to fall apart today if Putin goes. Yes, there will be serious problems, some internal strife and things. It's not going to fall apart and not going to collapse into many, different states and so forth. In 10 years, that might really happen. If this regime stays for 10 years, that's what might happen in 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's my answer. So I would say we need to do everything to avoid a situation where the Kremlin, and Putin can sell something to his own people to consolidate his power and use that as a argument, to stay in power and to basically, just freeze the country in the state that it is in today.
Very good. Thank you. I'd like to have somebody reply to that. I'd like to know what other people think about what Andre has just said.
Who is that speaking?
That was Meta Spencer.
No, before.
Is that Peter
Ron
Brogdon?
Smith was his name, I think, but I haven't quite clicked in yet. Everything. This is Meta Spencer's last Sunday of the month.
Yeah. So Peter, I think it's Peter Brogdon under that mask. I wouldn't bet. Hello, Peter. Do you have?
Okay, that's me.
Do you have a thought about what Andre has just said? Do we need to just make sure that we redouble our efforts, and because it is so important that there's no conceivable way in which we could accept anything less than complete victory for Ukraine? I think that's what
I want to add something.
Yeah.
I want to say that there is a lot that can be done that can improve Ukraine's chances for victory, and things that unfortunately are not being done today. If Ukraine would change its policy toward, Russia, as a nation, Russian people in general, and call on those groups in Russia who are opposing the current regime, and come up with a long list of options for people that want to resist, starting from joining the Russian forces. That there are some units in the Ukrainian army, Russian units, very few, but they've been very hesitant about expanding that, and promoting, resistance, nonviolence, everything, and changing its policy rather than speaking about, Russia needs to be destroyed. Speak in a different way, that Russia needs to be transformed, and Russian people also can have a better future, and not try to invest in, the focus right now is trying to speak about, to ethnic minorities in Russia and try to get them, to demand more freedom or independence from the central government. That might happen. Freedom should come for all, not just for some minority group. And I think there's a lot that can be done to improve the Ukrainian policy. That can be a trump card for not meaning Donald Trump, of course, but it could be a key factor that could strengthen Ukrainian position. And today, unfortunately, that's not the way things are going. So there is a lot that can be improved, but we should understand that nonetheless, Putin staying and consolidating his power will be much worse than anything we already see.
Okay, thank you. Now let's see. I think that Don has said.
Sorry.
Don
Yeah.
Smith wants to speak, and Paul Werbos also maybe speak to this issue. Don, I called on Peter Brogdon first, but I don't know whether you're ready to talk, Peter.
Well, I'm not ready. I don't
Okay, well,
know if my microphone is on.
Looks like you got injured. I'm sorry. Yeah, well, we'll come back to you. Don, do you want to speak about this issue?
Yeah, I wasn't really prepared to speak, and I think I missed part of Andre's talk, which sounded like a repetition of what the neocons are saying. I thought that most people in this group realized that the U.S. bears a huge amount of responsibility for what happened in Ukraine by very aggressive NATO expansion that was intentionally provocative. So if you look at it from Russia's point of view,
there's not very many people in this group that would agree with you, I don't think. We'll see, but you can't assume that anyway. I'll tell you that.
We can change history. There have been many
talking,
mistakes.
Andre.
Yeah,
I'm speaking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I could share this. I mean, this is a long talk. I mean, something like what Medea Benjamin and Nicholas Davies said would be what. But the point is, if you look back at the history of since World War II, the U.S. has overthrown governments all over the world, launched illegal invasions in Iraq, Afghanistan, killed 1 million people in Indonesia, overthrown governments and installed regressive regimes in South America, all in the name of defending its sphere of influence, which, yes, is the whole sphere of the globe. And nonetheless, and then more recently, according to Brown University's Cost of War project, just since 9/11, the U.S. has killed 900,000 people. U.S. wars have killed 900,000 people directly and another 3.5 million indirectly in these disastrous, mostly unjustified wars. We overthrew pro-Russian governments in Serbia, Libya, and Syria. And in Serbia, we were all taught that it was a humanitarian war. As Harper's Magazine just reported recently in an article, we've been lied to about that. It was a proxy. We allied with the Kosovo Liberation Army, which was basically a terrorist group. We similarly allied with Al-Qaeda in Syria to overthrow a pro-Russian government of Assad, and we currently occupy a third of the of Syrian territory, where the oil is, by the way, using our proxy army, the Syrian Defense Forces. And again, similarly in Libya, we destroyed Libya. It used to be the most prosperous country in Africa, maybe next to South Africa, and we destroyed it because it was a Russian ally. And similar thing happened in Ukraine, where we allied with far right groups that were attacking Russian speakers. And I have about 24. George Kennan, Matlock, the former ambassador to the Soviet Union, even Robert Kagan, 2 secretaries of defense, all sorts of academics say the U.S. provoked Russia and Japan in Ukraine. It's a total lie. Now, I do not justify those provocations. Do not justify fascist invasion. I mean, the war is war, but as Thomas Friedman said in New York Times, the U.S. isn't innocent in Ukraine, and who's this other? And there are U.S. senators. U.S. senators said yes. We helped overthrow. Chris Murphy, the U.S. senator, said yes. It was our actions that overthrew the pro-Russian government. There were New York Times articles that said this. So in short, if I was surprised. I thought this group was like an anti-war group among progressives, aligned like with Code Pink. But
no, I think you will find a variety of opinions here. So I think we've heard yours now, and I know that Paul Huervos had something on his mind a minute ago. Do you want to continue say what's on your mind about this, Paul?
Yeah. So there are many things on my mind. But on this one in particular, I agree that the United States has made terrible mistakes. And I know some of the people in the United States who are currently making terrible mistakes. But it's been pointed out by people on this list. The same is true of India. The same is true of China. The same is true of Russia. There was a time about 6 months ago when I said to myself, I know of 2 honest, important governments on earth. There is Finland and New Zealand. They seem to be honest. And then problems came to New Zealand and Finland. So at the end of the day, in these religious wars, my wife asked me, are you one of the people of the book? And I said, I am, except my book is von Neumann and Morgenstern, The Theory of Games, and his book had profound insights about game theory and interactions of people. And von Neumann's great commitment was to movement in the direction of a win-win solution, Pareto-optimal. I have heard Xi Jinping give speeches advocating that, but he has some people in China now who seem to have different values. The whole world has its problems. The US has it, China has it. They're bad people here, they're bad people in China. It's tough. But I agree with von Neumann that our only real hope of survival, as the game changes, as the game becomes more and more difficult because of new technology and new weapons, the only chance of survival is if we think in terms of win-win solutions, step by step, trying to balance these conflicts, good fences making good neighbors, reasonable step-by-step agreements so that we aren't all trying to kill each other.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to call on Mike next, and then Adam Wynn. Mike. Mike, you've been writing things, so I know you have thoughts. No?
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I've just been making notes on some of the comments here.
Okay, turn on your camera.
Well, you caught me shirtless, so that's why I've kept it off.
Okay. Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, basically, I'm pretty cynical now as to what's going on in the Ukraine and generally in the world as a whole. I don't have anything terribly profound to say at this point. I'm in agreement with a lot of the observations on the Ukraine, and also in the case of the U.S., its amazing ability to keep making the same mistakes. First in South Vietnam, then in Afghanistan, making virtually the same mistakes, and now in the Ukraine too.
Okay, well,
where
thank you.
it's amazing how ridden with corruption the present Ukrainian government is, which is something I find alarming. So I just see the U.S. as backing regimes which, at least in the case of South Vietnam and Afghanistan, had little or no popular support and were hopelessly corrupt. And I see something similar, though not as extreme, in the case of the Ukraine. Thanks for asking me to speak up.
Fine. Thank you. Adam Wynn, you're next, and then Charles Talbert.
So I'm currently out walking on the street, as you can see, because I was at home and about 5 minutes after the town hall started, my neighbor in the adjoining house decided to start redoing their roof. So all you could hear is hammering and air compressors and people yelling. So I'm outside right now. But one of the fellows that was just talking mentioned Jack Matlock, and you interviewed him, I think, just before the start of the Ukraine conflict. And he was he's now in his 90s. He was the last ambassador for the United States to the Soviet Union, and he's in his 90s now. And he was talking about going over to Russia to kind of liaise with the current political regime and other retired diplomats. And I'm curious if he ever did that with the rise of the conflict, if he managed to get over there or not. But Meta, have you considered interviewing Matlock with McFall to get kind of a contemporary and a previous ambassador's perspective on the conflict? I know there has talked about it.
I have interviewed him, but not about
No,
this.
I know you interviewed them both separately, but together in the same dialogue.
Who's the other one you want me to talk to?
You have interviewed both Matlock and McFall separately on a few occasions. Have you considered putting them together for a joint discussion with a?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a good idea. That's your assignment. Go get Matlock and McFall together.
Okay, I can try to.
Thank you. Okay, very good.
Are there any other ambassadors you want to throw in there?
I can't think of any right now. Did anybody know who?
Because there's Ralph Lyshyshin, but he was, I think, was he Ukraine rather than, and he was a Canadian one, or was he Russia as well?
No, he's Canadian. So I can't remember who the American.
No, I know he's a Canadian ambassador, but was he the ambassador to Ukraine or to Russia or both?
Yes,
both.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
And what about Marius Grinius?
Well, I don't know. We'll talk about it. I
Okay,
can't think of off right now. Okay, thank you. And Charles Tauber, hello. How's everything in Croatia? You got to unmute.
Yes, I see. How are things here?
I would really like to get a bit more clued up on what's going on in that, but I just can't.
Is this Peter Brogdon? Is that you speaking?
Oh my goodness! Oh, my microphone is on. I didn't think it was. I thought I'd turn it. No, I don't have any comments to make.
Okay, Charles Tauber was speaking, but trying to collect what to. Okay, hello, back to you, Charles.
Well, here, first of all, I'm not surprised that we have fewer people because today is Yom Kippur, or it's the evening before Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish year. So I wish everyone that they may be written in the book of the living for the coming year, to start off with. In terms of Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, it's a mess, as it always is. We're expecting elections in the coming year. I've been working on a manual on psychology in conflict for people working and living in conflict areas. And I'm finding an amazing, how shall I say it? You must take things as a whole. You cannot separate psychology, immunology, in other words, physical health, and all the rest of it. It's absolutely essential that that happen. There are going to be 2 sets of elections here in the coming year. One for the Parliament of Croatia, which probably will go along the same ethnic lines that it always has, and for the European Parliament. So we shall see what happens.
You expect the same outcome of the election in Croatia as in terms of the government that you have now, is that it?
Basically, it's slightly more liberal than it has been in the past, but still it's not very good. We're getting a lot of comments from various people where suicide rates in all over Europe and Africa, particularly among young people, are very high and rising. We're seeing no solutions to the migrant issues. Huge numbers of migrants coming into Southern and Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And we're seeing what, to my mind, is absolute inhumanity in terms of the way migrants are being treated. Witness what the Pope had to say in Marseille on Saturday.
What? I didn't hear that.
He's very pro-migrant and was talking about the inhumanity of the situation. And so that's basically what we're trying to deal with. And Don Smith is saying the real scandal of Putin's war is that NATO is barking at Putin's door. Yeah, the whole political situation, as far as I'm concerned, is disgusting. I see it as completely inhumane. Nobody is dealing with, as we've said in the past, nobody is dealing with the human sides of these issues. And it's all politics. Very unfortunate.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'm blessings for all the work you're doing there. And I wish it were easier for you. Andre, let you have the floor for a moment, and then I want to greet Alice Slater, who's joined us. I haven't seen Alice on this before, but Andre.
Yeah. I just wanted to respond because there was a lot said, after my presentation. There's absolutely no question that the United States, NATO, other countries have made terrible mistakes, committed crimes, et cetera, I personally believe that had it not been for the war in Iraq, the handling of the crisis in Yugoslavia, and specifically the recognition of the self-proclaimed independence of Kosovo in 2008, there wouldn't be any war in Ukraine today. Putin did react to tragic and terrible mistakes that were made by other powers. However, that doesn't give us any answer what we should do in the future. It's important to recognize these mistakes, and it's important to work on these cases. But today we've got what we've got. We have a newly formed fascist regime in Russia with all of its potential. And if that regime is able to consolidate and stay in power for a long enough time, it's going to be a disaster for Russia, for Ukraine, and for the entire world. And that is something that's very important to understand. And another thing that I can't just not mention is that in the comments, in the chat, in some of the comments, I see that there is a lot of misconceptions about the reality in Ukraine. I live in Ukraine. Things here are far from ideal. There are always, serious problems and things like that. But it's not the most corrupt country as it's. I've lived here for 8 years. I have never actually ran into a case of corruption myself in 8 years that I live here. I'm a Russian speaker. I speak Russian. I never ran into any problems about that. When I see comments that the Azov Battalion was harassing people in Crimea, I'm sorry, the Azov Battalion never was in Crimea. The Azov Battalion only was developed after Crimea was annexed by Russia, so there's no way they could harass or do anything there and all that. There's a lot of bullshit flowing around about Ukraine that's simply not true. Now, I'm not saying there's not things that are true and problems to be addressed that need to be addressed, but there's a lot of things that I hear about Ukraine that simply do not match the facts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a fascinating discussion. It just perhaps convinces me more that there's got to be, as soon as possible, a ceasefire and some diminution of this war. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely dreadful.
Question is, on what terms and what's the best conditions that we could hope to get, and how much can people be persuaded to accept it? I mean, I think this is the question. What will come out of this? Mike Goodman, do you want to speak on this? Barbara was just saying that we want an end to this war. We sure do. The question is, what's the best outcome can we expect to get, and how to get it? What do we have to do to get something that people can possibly tolerate? I mean, Andrei is saying that the Ukrainians simply cannot tolerate anything except victory, basically. I think that's what you're saying, isn't it, Andrei?
It's not just Ukrainians. I mean, I imagine that if things don't go in a good direction, if the war turns into stalemate, attitudes will change in Ukraine. And, I don't know, because obviously people are getting killed. Ukraine is being devastated. The economy is down. People are, you can't live like this for forever. So I'm not saying that it's excluded that something like that will happen, but I think that will be absolutely terrible thing. Maybe less so for actually even for Ukraine, but even more so for the entire world and for Russia itself. Mm-hmm. So we need to see that today the key problem is this fascist regime in Russia, and it's no exaggeration. Just look at, the textbook, what is fascism, and, put the checks in and it all fits completely. That's what we have.
Well, I certainly don't disagree with you, but I think Don Smith does, and I don't know if anybody else does. I mean, it sounded like Don Smith would be perfectly happy having Putin win.
I that's I do not support Putin. I think his war was vicious. It's criminal. My point is, there are 2 points. The U.S. provoked it intentionally.
No, I don't agree to that.
They were warned by diplomats and by their own Rand Corporation that it would result in a war, but they purposely did it because they wanted to weaken Russia, and they were using Ukraine as pawn. The second point is, U.S. has done the same thing and even worse all over the world, so they're huge hypocrites. And there was something else I was going to say.
Well, but if how does that have? What's the bearing of that? If we agree with you, and I agree that the U.S. has done some terrible things, maybe worse than anybody else. How does that have any bearing on whether or not it would be good to have a fascist regime in Russia now?
I don't think. Well, we supported fascist far right groups that were the Azov Battalion, the right sector, Svoboda, whatever it's called, and it also about the ceasefire. There were the Minsk agreements, which said, well, the Donbass would get a limited amount of independence, but the U.S. squashed that. They just used it to arm Ukraine to build up because they wanted to push. They wanted to fight Russia. And then early in the war, this was several diplomats and was a Israeli Prime Minister Bennett said that Russia and Ukraine had almost come to an agreement on a ceasefire. And
can we talk about what should be done now? And what
we should have a ceasefire which allows the Russian-speaking provinces in eastern Ukraine, the Donbass, and in the Crimea to be associated with Russia, which is what the people there wanted to do anyway. The polls, even government, even international organizations said yes. The polls show the majority of people there wanted to be associated with Russia, and so. Unfortunately, Ukraine's going to have to give up some land or decide the fate of it later. And otherwise, if Russia wins the war, that's not a good. And Russia very well could win. Ukraine is exhausted now, from what I hear. And if the U.S. or Ukraine succeeded in pushing Russia out of Crimea and Donbass, there's no doubt that Russia will go nuclear. It will be an existential threat. Now you may say this is nuclear blackmail. Well, maybe it is. But, just like in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the solution was Soviet Union withdrew its missiles from Cuba, and secretly the U.S. withdrew missiles from Turkey, I think it was. And so, international relations, nobody gets everything they want. So so anyway,
I'm going to go on
a year ago, Russia and Ukraine almost came to an agreement for a ceasefire, but the U.S. and Boris Johnson said, no, you mustn't do that. We have to fight Russia to the end. So there is wars either end in negotiated solution or somebody loses. And somebody losing the war in this case would mean nuclear war. Which is an unacceptable solution. Russia, if Russia is not going to give up Crimea and probably the Donbass without launching a nuclear war.
Andre?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's be clear. Russia had formally annexed 5 Ukrainian provinces, 4 of which it doesn't even control. And in two of which it doesn't even control the regional capital. It had control of Kherson for a while and was pushed out of there a year ago by the Ukrainian military. But it still controls a large part of the Kherson region, a part of the Zaporizhia region, a large part of the Donetsk region, and the most of the Luhansk region. All these regions, and of course the Crimean Peninsula. All these regions have been formally annexed. Russia announced that it's their territory. They've written them into their constitution and so forth. There's absolutely no justification for that. Second, the reality is I work with the people that are supporting nonviolent resistance and people that have some communications with those who still are staying in the areas of Ukraine that have been occupied by Russia. The reality is that maybe in Crimea, maybe there was a majority, but that's very questionable, pro-Russian support. In other regions, that's very, very questionable because the tremendous amount, when the war began in the Donbass in 2014, a tremendous amount of people left from these areas primarily to Ukraine. Quite a few left to Russia, yes, but much less. Some left to Belarus, to other countries, etc. But the majority of people that left these pro-Russian territories, people from the Donbass who lived in Ukraine. Today, in areas like Zaporizhia, that's the southern area that's still the part that's still under Russian control. About 2/3 of the people simply left after these areas were occupied in 2022. So it's ridiculous to say that the majority of the people support that when 2/3 of the people left. You're just speaking to 1/3 of the population that's still there. So and obviously there's no possibility to have any kind of real opinion poll in this kind of situation. So there's maybe in Crimea there's a majority, but I would question that very much on all the other 4 regions of Ukraine, 2 of which Russia doesn't even control the regional capitals of which, and it doesn't control any of them completely, and where the majority of the people simply left. So this is pointless to say that the majority. There are people who are pro-Russian there, no question. But it is a minority, and the best option would be to try to somehow accommodate, to work with the Ukrainians to make them more accommodative to the people that live there, so they're not as afraid. There are groups that are afraid of Ukraine returning and reprisals and all that. Unfortunately, in a war situation, you can't, avoid that completely. But it would be very good for Ukraine to have a very sensible policy in this aspect. But it's wrong to say that these are pro-Russian, majority pro-Russian territories. It's simply not true.
Thank you. Okay, Chand.
This is a proxy war which is being done by US. It is nothing but a proxy war. Otherwise, see, NATO is the main culprit of making this association of these countries, where if we have to stop this war, first of all, Ukraine, if it accepts not to become a member of NATO, is one of the points I have. The second thing is that why US is trying to build up more nations, bringing under the umbrella of NATO and thereby threatening Russia and sitting in the neighborhood of Russia. And when they are there in Ukraine, how can they be peaceful in Russia? So the main culprit is NATO. If it is disintegrated, then definitely things will be in place. For that, an example is Russia at one time, all these, Eastern nations, Russia, Romania, Poland, all of them were as one unit, as an association. They have come out of that. They have divided that. Why NATO has to increase the number of membership, thereby you're unnecessarily creating unrest. Tell me, if Russia and Ukraine are having war, is that US has to interfere everywhere, wherever there is war, US will be showing its presence. I tell US is the main culprit for all the unrest in the world. Wherever it happens, they poke themselves, they show their supremacy. Why? If they are superpower, nobody is making any sanctions against US. US makes sanctions against any country and everybody. Why not sanctions against US when they are making many a times mistakes? Right from the time of Nagasaki, Hiroshima, when they have dropped, atom bombs, from that time onwards, whether a war in Afghanistan or Iraq or in most of the Libya, everywhere they interfere. Whosoever is not listening to them, that's it. So
I'm not excited or anything, but what I say is US is the main culprit, which is making this war not to conclude. If NATO is not accepted by Ukraine, the war will immediately stop. That is where the solution I look from my side, and I don't want to stretch more onto this.
Okay, and Alexei.
If we think that one country is allowed to dictate other countries, neighboring countries, what they should do, that's a very dangerous path that we're taking. So if we agree that Russia, Putin's regime can dictate the Ukrainians where they should go, how they should decide on the fate of their country, that's a really slippery slope because this will mean that other strong countries like China, for example, can also do the same, and Putin will not stop there. If he succeeds here, if he gets away with his criminal war in Ukraine, I guess this will bring us a bit too far. And the second point I would like to make here, connected to the first point, is whenever we think we can decide what the Ukrainians can do or should do with their country, they should give up land, they should reject membership in NATO, for example, forever. If we give such advices to Ukrainians, if we try to decide for them, I think every one of us should think about their own country. Would we be happy if our own country gives up land, if it succumbs to the dictate of other countries? That's important. It's always helpful to kind of identify with the situation from your own perspective, and then maybe someone will change their opinion if we do it, if we try to put ourselves in the shoes of Ukrainians. Thank you.
I just want to say one word. Ukrainians are not fighting because they've been told by the US or anyone else to fight. They're fighting because their country was invaded. And they started fighting the first month before when they fought. They got very little practical military support from outside countries. By the time Russian troops were leaving from 3 Ukrainian regions, all basically defeated or forced to leave because they were not getting anywhere and just losing lots of personnel and lots of equipment. This happened before a single artillery piece came to Ukraine. Not speaking about, other more advanced systems. All they got is basically these they did get some anti-tank systems, these handheld javelins and so forth, and maybe a little bit of anti-aircraft, also these simple handheld anti-aircraft munitions. That's about all they got before, when the war began. It was only a couple months later when the Russian plan failed, when Russian troops were already pulling out of many parts of Ukraine, that Ukraine really started getting serious military support.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Who else?
Yeah, could I make one quick point that I was going to make before?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to remember that Crimea was unilaterally gifted by Khrushchev in 1954 from Russia to the Ukraine, partly as a sop to the fact that Khrushchev was obviously Ukrainian. And this was done, I think, with only the flimsiest of legality. And of course, at that time, it didn't really make much difference which republic of the USSR administered the territory. But I think that in the event of any type of settlement between Russia and the Ukraine, I think the Ukraine may have to concede its hold on Crimea just on the basis of history and the fact that Khrushchev acted so unilaterally in 1954.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
I just want to comment every time, but okay, sorry, I don't want to steal.
Go ahead, Anthony. It's all right. We have another 5 minutes.
The reason the reason Crimea was transferred to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic at the time in 1954 was very simple, because Crimea had the land bridge to Ukraine. It didn't have it to Russia, and it had a tremendous problem with water. Most of it is very arid place. And so there was this plan to build a major waterway channel from the Dnieper River, and for administrative purposes and so forth, it made sense for Crimea, that was in a very poor state then, to be part of Ukraine. At the same time, some areas previously that were part of Ukraine, like the city of Taganrog, at certain times, maybe not in 54, maybe before that, but were moved from the Ukrainian SR to the Russian. These things happened in different ways during the Soviet Union. Borders didn't mean much at the time. So
Right.
Changes happened, and they happened both ways. So we cannot try to justify by these historical stories that, things today. It's just history is not a justification for today's reality. We should, everybody can find something in history to justify almost any potential claim he has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, who else has something to say before I wind this up? Anybody? If not, then let me just say, oh yes, Charles.
We're all talking about power. We're not talking about people. We're not talking about what's happening on the ground and to human beings. And that to me is crucial, because people are not eating. People are really being extremely highly traumatized. Children are not going to school. Children are being traumatized. Now, we know very well from all the research and from everything that we do know about trauma, that this is not going to end with this generation. This will be transmitted from generation to generation, and this will go on for literally hundreds of years. There is good evidence that this even works epigenetically, that it gets into the DNA literally. And this is something that nobody seems to be giving attention to. It's all this bloody politics, and it's all the rest of that, and nothing is happening with human beings. And that really bothers me.
Hmm. Well, it would be lovely if we had world government, wouldn't it? Then we, instead of killing each other, we could sue each other and go to court and get a settlement. And somebody would even be paying reparations for invading a neighbor. But that isn't what we have now. And the challenge is, how do we create such a place, in my point of view? And unless we have that kind of solution, I simply cannot imagine how conflicts are going to be prevented in the future. So it is about time for us to wind up. And I thank you all. I want to point out that what we do is record these. I'll be editing it. And maybe by tomorrow, I will be able to put it onto our website. And you can go to the website and in the search bar, look for episode 570. That's what this one will be, episode 570. And if it's up already, it'll take you right there and you can watch yourselves. Or you can share the link to your friends and ask them to watch you. And I think you can also comment. So there are lots and lots of things on the chat, but of course, people can't see the chat. You can see each other chatting because we're all on Zoom, but the audience watching us live or the audience watching the recording later would not be able to see the chat, except that I will put it up on the website. So if you want to see the chat, go to the website and look for the chat. It'll be in the comments section. So look at 570 and scroll down. If you want to comment on something somebody has said, click the little button called Click to Comment, and it will take you someplace else where you can enter your comments, or you can look around and look for the chat, which I will print there. So all these things that you haven't been able to see while watching each other, you'll be able to see there in terms of the chat. And next time, please come back. We do these global town halls on the last Sunday of every month from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's Toronto time. And so you just have to make that adjustment about where you are in the world. And please do join us. Somebody says, don't put my chat on the website. I can't delete anything. If you type something on the chat, it will be seen. So if you don't want to be seen, don't put it in the chat, because I do try to share it. Anything else that we need to say before we say goodbye? Well, this has been more confrontational than the average global town hall. I think we actually do have some significant disagreements, but that's life. So we're dealing with them, and I think at least we're not hurting each other too much. So thank you all, and I'll see you in another month, I hope. Have a good month. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Project Save the World produces these forums. This is episode 570. Watch them or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. You can share information there also about 6 global issues. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. Project Save the World also produces a quarterly online publication, Peace Magazine. You can subscribe for $20 Canadian per year. Just go to pressreader.com on your browser, and in the search bar, enter the word peace. You'll see buttons to click to subscribe.